The Senate now set to take up a measure passed by the House that calls for the popular social media app TikTok to be sold by its Chinese owner, ByteDance.
Yeah, the measure passed overwhelmingly in a bipartisan vote but faces an uncertain future in the Senate. The concern by TikTok and its millions of users is how the measure could lead to a ban of the app here in the U.S.
I don't support a ban on TikTok. The legislation did not ban TikTok. It's simply a divestiture of TikTok so that this social media platform can be owned by an American company.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of senators. They are looking, a lot of them are looking towards how strong this vote is. So the fact that it's such an overwhelming vote for Republicans and Democrats bodes well.
Joining us this morning for a wide-ranging discussion on TikTok and its use here in the U.S. are three people who bring different areas of expertise and viewpoints, which of course we love, right? So Stuart Roy is the former director for the National Republican Senatorial Committee under Mitch McConnell. Andy Kaiser is a cybersecurity expert and senior fellow for the National Security Institute. And Emily Swift is a content creator on TikTok and owner of Dark Slide Film Lab. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. All right, so Stuart, let's start with you since this has become such a political issue. The bill did have overwhelming bipartisan support, but still needs to pass the Senate where that seems to be pretty uncertain there at that level. So how much of this is about national security? How much about freedom of speech? And how much is just politics at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many elements to this bill and the underlying currents in it, but there are certainly real privacy concerns. There are concerns about the relationship between the parent company, ByteDance, and the Chinese government. All those are legitimate. The question is, does this bill really address that? I think that's also something to look at. But you were talking about the overwhelming vote, 50-0 in the committee, and then overwhelming 360 something. On the House floor. But sometimes the scariest words in D.C. are bipartisan consensus. And so when something passes like that, you really need to take a close look at the bill. And I think that's what's going to happen in the Senate. There's, as you know, there's a competing measure in the Senate as well. And so I think it's going to move a lot slower in the Senate, and it'll be scrutinized. But I think this is real, and the threat to ByteDance or TikTok is very real here.
And Andy, you've written extensively about the shifting balance between the U.S. and China, one of the world's most complicated foreign relationships because we desperately need, but also compete with each other. So that's always an interesting dynamic. But when it comes to cyber security and national security, lawmakers have pointed to China basically saying, this app helps China collect a lot of data. I'm still trying to understand for the life of me what the connection is between ByteDance knowing that Emily's doing her dance video at her garage in Detroit, and what that has to do with putting American national security at risk. I just want someone to connect those dots for me fully to elaborate on this national security risk when I can think of a whole lot of others right now that don't get attention and damn sure don't get a bill passed in 8 days in the current U.S. House.
Well, that's correct, and it's actually not TikTok in and of itself that is problematic. It's the ownership by the parent company in China. So, and I'm actually not even as concerned as the data that could be collected. It's the fact that the Chinese government has access to a platform with 170 million Americans' phones. So they could turn those phones into collection devices. They could disable them in event of a action, say crossing the Taiwan Strait. So a very legitimate national security threat to have the world's most preeminent adversary with control over 170 million Americans' phones. TikTok, the platform, less problematic. And in fact, I think this bill will lead to divestiture, which would just change ownership, and TikTok would continue to function as it does every day.
Speaking of that, do we think this effort announced yesterday by Steve Mnuchin, former Treasury Secretary, an interesting figure in the Trump cabinet, do you think that's a real thing? He's actually going to buy out ByteDance, more or less, he and his partners?
I suspect someone will. This is where it ends. And for me, the fact that ByteDance and TikTok have had such a visceral reaction to this development tells me that they indeed are controlled by their parent company, and the Chinese Communist Party don't want to let this go. So whether it's Mr. Mnuchin's, Secretary Mnuchin's ownership group or someone else, I think the United States national security leaders and our partners around the world are just interested in that moving control from China to literally almost anywhere else.
So, Emily, over to you now. For the thousands of people like you who literally make their living creating content on TikTok and other social platforms, what do you need lawmakers and others to know and understand about all of this?
So having my audience on TikTok has truly allowed me to connect with the subculture that my business exists within. Film photography, shooting film, processing film, this is a very niche hobby to have. And it's very hard to find people with that interest en masse so easily like it is on TikTok. I just don't think that other social media platforms give us the opportunity to reach exactly who we're trying to reach in such a large amount so easily. And this platform and TikTok and the reach that my business has on this platform has kept my business open. I mean, we were on the fritz of almost failing when we had a video go on to reach over 4 million viewers, and that changed everything for my small business. Today, nearly 80% of our lead generation comes from TikTok. And if we lose our platform, I'm not sure that we'll be able to continue to have that many leads and that much business.
So are you concerned about the cybersecurity aspects that we're talking about right now?
I think it's definitely a concern, but I think that the conversation should be more centered around data protection and not banning one specific app. Nobody seems to be talking about all of the other social media platforms that sell our data and who they're selling the data to. So while I think that there should definitely, it's definitely part of the conversation, I don't think it should all be targeted just at banning one platform.
And she raises a good point there because, listen, all these platforms do collect data. Now, they may not all have links to China, which I think is what makes TikTok a special example. But I'm curious, we live in this era now where Facebook's collecting and Instagram's collecting. Apple knows where you are. You Google something, all of a sudden it pops up on your Facebook feed. It's a real big brothery kind of time in American society. But address her point about why this spotlight on TikTok and not the others, because we're all being surveilled digitally in one way or another.
You know, it's absolutely a great point, very legitimate, because there are real privacy concerns about data collected across the board by technology companies, but this really boils down to the parent companies we were talking earlier, and the laws in China which require companies to support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work. That's very disturbing. And in many ways, this vote in Congress and this bill in Congress are really a proxy vote for the great distrust between the United States and China. You know, Nixon went to China 50 plus years ago, and while he's passed on, this relationship is, while not toes up, is certainly not in good shape right now.
Andy, I want to ask you about something that Emily just said, that the conversation should also focus on data protection and not necessarily the reactive part of this and banning one particular platform. What does that data protection look like when it comes to cybersecurity when there are other countries like, let's say, Russia that has, found ways to kind of meddle in our elections here in America through social media platforms, not just TikTok?
Yeah, it's a good point. And actually, just earlier this week, the director of national intelligence testified up on the Hill that the Chinese government was using TikTok to spread misinformation and disinformation in this current election in 2024. So certainly an issue there, though, again, Facebook, X, Instagram, the other social platforms, though they certainly have their issues. I have 2 young daughters, for example, that are concerning what they might find on there. They are not beholden to the Chinese government. They are not part of this regime that is our geopolitical primary adversary in the world. So I think a huge difference there. But again, I'm not for banning TikTok necessarily. Right. I'm just for changing that ownership.
And Emily, to that point, I mean, let me be old grumpy guy for a second, shockingly. I mean,
grumpy, no.
If they really did come to you with evidence and says, listen, China is doing or has likely potential to do bad stuff with this data, you would understand, I hope, that national security as a whole is more important than your individual business. And you would also understand that in the age we live in, the next TikTok, in some way or another, would come along. Another platform that would be popular and useful and what have you, without these national security concerns. You would accept that life would go on if TikTok does not.
While I understand that, I also think that it's important to note that over 5 million small businesses rely on TikTok to keep their doors open every month. So it wouldn't just be my business that's affected. There are millions of small businesses that would face the possibility of going under due to this.
So do you think that whoever buys it next would, I guess, hinder your business, make it better? Is there concerns with that? Because, or are you necessarily against the sale or just not banning it?
Really, I would like to see it not banned. And I think that part of what makes TikTok so magical is the fact that there's no bias with the current ownership as far as I'm concerned. But I fear that if it gets into the hands of a US-based company, there might be the introduction of more biases that work in favor of the government. I mean, we have the ability to spread news amongst one another right now with the platform as the way it is. And I fear that creators would lose that opportunity to speak so candidly and so freely on the app.
You know, that is something, though, that I have noticed just on social media. People that are worried about this whole thing is that this is what they say and believe is that this is what the government's way of censoring and putting a damper on free speech and how they get their news, which is where a lot of people do get their news nowadays.
You trust the owner in a communist country, but wouldn't trust the owner of a democracy. That's a whole nother discussion. We'll leave it there, though. This was really helpful and insightful, and again, really interesting points of view on a complicated issue. Of course, we'll see what Congress does. It won't be fast. We can pretty much guarantee that. But Stuart, Roy, Andy Kaiser, Emily Swift, thank you all very much. Have a lovely weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you.
More news after this.